Hello and welcome to part 6 of the first episode of the Pioneers Conclave. My name is Dhruv Joshi, and in this podcast, we will be covering the interview segment of IIM Ahmedabad with Mr. Upamanyu Acharya. Are you keen on knowing what one must expect in an IIM Ahmedabad interview and what is the panel looking for? If yes, then this is the best podcast for you. Do check out our social media handles for more details. To get in touch with Mr. Upamanyu, do check out our YouTube channel, eSell and Skill Hub Hind College. His social media handles are listed in the description box. Not taking more of your time, let's get straight to the conversation. To the segment of interviews. So I suppose interviews are the most difficult things to crack at usually at institutes and definitely at IIM. So what kind of preparations did you put in now? What kind of efforts from your side were involved in prepping for the interview?
I feel my interview preparation was more in depth than my CAT preparation, honestly. So my path was a bit different. I also did not take any outside help or any. I didn't join any coaching institute for interview preparation. I knew that the interview would be one of my strengths, at least compared to CAT and compared to the average student who gets an interview opportunity. So I knew I had a bit of an advantage coming in because, like I mentioned previously, all the small things building up in life, whether it's public speaking or having opportunities to present yourself to other companies, even doing e-summit, almost every uh, like corporate who I met, it was sort of an interview because they start off by asking, "Oh, you're from Jai Hind. What do you do?" Right. So in eSummit 2016, I met at least 50 different people by visiting their offices, and almost all of them were like some form of interview. So I'm familiar with that interview type of setting at that point. Still, I didn't have any professional coaching, and if you do get a chance to interview for an IIM, I think there is very little downside in taking help from one of the CAT coaching institutes because they will tell you exactly what you expect. Now, for me, I had to break it down very simply. I knew what my strengths were. My strengths were in geopolitics and my field of cryptocurrency. A lot of questions were from that. So I knew almost all the answers in that. I didn't have to work on that. My weaknesses would lie in a bit of current affairs, especially Indian politics. These would be my weakness. And if there were any mathematical questions which they tried to ask me at that point, that would be my weakness. So I do brush up on my academics, not so much in marketing, because again, I knew my strengths in marketing, but in things like statistics and economics, the quantitative aspect of it. For sure, every interview will have a little bit of a quantitative line of questioning. Like they might ask you something as basic as what is the difference between mean, median, mode. They might go even that level of basic, and they might ask you something supremely complicated. Like they'll show you a curve and tell you, write the formula for this curve for me, depending on what their perception of your aptitude is, right? Uh, so again, coming back to the taking help part, you have to analyze very early on what is your strengths going into the interview, and you have to take help based on that. So if you don't know what line of questioning can also come to you from the interviewers, it's best to take outside help and join a coaching institute. But if you do know that, then the preparation for that has to be very rigorous and very in depth. Usually students have to prepare their past academics. That is a very important focus. So if you're a BBA, BMS grad, preparing economics questions, preparing accounting questions uh, are supremely important. Also, everyone has to know current affairs. There will be a line of questioning on what is going on in the world, right? And no IIM wants to get a candidate who does not know what is going on across the globe. So I started reading newspapers religiously almost September onwards. So September 2018. Interviews were in February. Uh, yeah, I think that is pretty much it. If there's anything else you want me to cover for interviews, I'm happy to share.
So I just wanted to ask you, this is a thing which I personally believe in, and just I wanted to ask you whether it's true or not. I mean, I believe that the candidate decides the path of the interview more than the interviewers. Is that true?
Yeah, I think there is truth to that to a certain extent. The large buckets of the interview have to be covered by the interviewers. So there's no way to weasel yourself out of academic questions, or you can't weasel yourself out of current affairs questions if you don't know any current affairs. That is not happening. But by and large, yes, you're right. I'll give you an example from my IIM Ahmedabad interview. Uh, I had an economics prof as well as an alumni who seemed to be from banking or investment banking. I'm not exactly sure, but she definitely had a finance background. So these were the two interviewers, and they were asking fairly heavily economic based questions. So questions uh, what are the economic implications of cryptocurrency or Bitcoin, like that. So they will never ask you directly direct academic questions unless they want to go down that route. They will usually try to base it around your experience. So if you're a non-engineer, they won't be asking you any engineering questions, obviously, but they probably won't get into calculus and all that because they know that that is not your area of expertise. If they see you have worked at a crypto exchange as a marketing executive, they will ask you marketing questions. They will ask you questions that relate to your own field. So for me, like the professor asked me, what's the implications of crypto on economics? And I spoke a little bit about this earlier in the podcast, which is that it's a completely free market and all of that. It's the first time you get to explore what a free market truly looks like because everyone has access to it across the globe, and that might have implications on the financial industry. So you have to be prepared with any line of questioning within your domain expertise. And if you feel like you are not showing any particular domain expertise, uh, before CAT, sorry, not before CAT, but before the interview, you will have to fill out a form that IIM Ahmedabad or IIM-ABC sends you. In that form, they will ask you to list your achievements, your hobbies, extracurriculars, everything, right? And in that form, you have a great opportunity to write down interesting topics that you want to talk about in the interview. So almost everything that I was asked in the interview was from my form because they saw multiple interesting topics for me. For example, cryptocurrency experience, not many candidates would have that. Someone who has done BMS and started their own company, also not many people who have done that. So they would ask questions based on that. Again, marketing little bit because it's my field. It is what I majored in. They had some marketing questions. So my advice would be take that form seriously if you have the opportunity, and prepare based on your strengths. You can turn your weaknesses into your strengths during the interview. Exactly the point that you brought up. If you don't know anything, you can simply tell them, I don't know this, but I do know this. I can tell you about it. Most of the times, the interviewers are willing to listen. So it's not like they'll stop you in with facts unless they're really willing to test you.
So you don't need to basically bluff your way through. If you can be honest, if you don't know a particular topic.
Yeah. You should never bluff because come on, these professors have been doing it for 25 years, right? They've been taking interviews for a long time. They can see right through any bluff that any student would do. It's always better to admit if you don't know anything. And in my interview, I think all three IIM-ABC interviews, there were points where I said, I don't know this. But it can't stop there. You can't say, I don't know this and just sit there, right? You have to offer something else. So you can say like, okay, I don't exactly know the economic implications, but I do know that because the price of cryptocurrency has been increasing, that there will be like a supply demand gap or something like that you can always make up. So it's important to have at least some justification for why you don't know it, uh,
Needs to have a
or
backup
something else you
statement,
can offer,
basically.
some insight essentially. Yeah.
Okay, so coming to the next question regarding interviews. So what do you think you did wrong specifically in your interview, and you could have, maybe if given a chance, you would have just gone back in the past and replaced that segment of the interview?
What have I done wrong? So, yeah, looking back, I think more or less all interviews went well because I prepared fairly decently. Like I said, I prepared the buckets of interview questions and specifically on those, and those were mostly what was asked. Uh, for me, I did not focus enough on the academic aspect of it. So every interview has some level of academics which will come from your own experience. So in IIM Ahmedabad, they asked me, okay, what are your favorite subjects? And based on those subjects, I expected them to ask me questions that were not from those subjects. So they would ask you like, what's your favorite subject? Okay, tell me this answer from one of the subjects you haven't listed. So I said all the marketing subjects, and that's exactly what happened, which is they asked me an accounting question, right? So they can be very tricky like that. Interviews obviously try to see whether the student can cope with a bit of pressure in an interview situation. Honestly, at the end of the day, that's what they're judging, because it's not like if you have got a great percentile in CAT and you're giving an interview for IIM Ahmedabad that you know absolutely nothing. That's a very rare scenario, and almost never happens. So they're just trying to gauge whether putting you in an uncomfortable spot makes you crack under pressure. And if you remain very calm and you can answer in a polite but polite but firm way, that is exactly what they're looking for.
Exactly. Brings us to the last question of the interview segment of IIM. What are the key things which they look at? You actually covered it, but what are the key things which the panel looks at in a student? Is it more of knowledge? Is it more of confidence about how the person speaks? Or what do you think is the panel looking for in a student? In like ratios, basically.
Got it. So it's obviously a combination of what you mentioned. I'll tell you that the interview panel for IIM-A mostly consists of professors and alumni for any IIM, for any IIM for that matter. They are looking at a candidate whose profile they will be able to sell to the companies that come to recruit them. Essentially, that is the goal. One of our professors at IIM-A said, you guys are the product and we are the factory. So you're not the customer. The customer is the company who comes to recruit, even though you're paying the fees. So it's a bit of a convoluted sort of business strategy. But yeah, that's essentially what it is, which is they want to look at how good of a product can you be for the company. And then you have to just simply think about what is it that the companies want. Do the companies want someone who's really knowledgeable? Do the companies want someone who can handle themselves, right? So you work backwards from that. Basically, to break it down in terms of ratios, I would say, yeah, a large part of it is how you present yourself, whether you can be comfortable talking about something that you're not so sure of, how sincere you are, how sincere do you come across, can you admit your own mistakes. These are all very highly valued qualities in any MBA institute. Knowledge, I would say, does not hold a very, very high uh, role for IIM-A interviews, simply because like I said, most people there are knowledgeable. So knowledge won't be the differentiating factor. At least anyone who's got 99 plus percentile in CAT, high likelihood that they are knowledgeable about their own field. Also, the ability to explain precisely and succinctly what your experience is. If you keep rambling on and on, that is not a good look. So, if you can summarize in one or two sentences who you are, what your background is like, that is valued very highly. So, more or less, yeah, it's about confidence, it's about presentation, it's about sincerity, and it's about whether they think you can cope with A, the academic environment, and B, the corporate environment that comes after that. Basically, that is it.
That was a very insightful interview segment which we just had.